I'm gonna go with the cloud. All right, well, welcome everyone. It's 6 o'clock, so we can go ahead and get the ball rolling, and I'm sure people will trickle in while I'm introducing everyone. My name is Sarah Barnes. I am the president of the local league now, following in the footsteps of Vicki Connor, which you also see on the screen. And Vicki is now the secretary, and Judy Ball is vice president, and then Lindell Malekia is the treasurer. And I see our other board members, not all of them are here yet, but there's Shirley and Jonathan Rosenbaum and Nancy Ulrich. And I don't see Carol Barnes yet. But, oh, there she is. She's coming in. Also Penny Thomas and Marley Yanigas.
She's got me hot footing all over the shop today. Yeah, I thought
it would be a good idea to mute yourself while we're before our speaker gets started. And speaking of our speaker, we will be hearing from Carye Blaney today. We were just talking to Carrie. She's not really in San Francisco, but that's where her picture is. She is the Monongalia County Clerk, and Carrie's been our county clerk since 2007. And although her office is responsible for many of the county functions, including recording real estate documents, handling probate, recording births and deaths, we in the league mostly associated her with voting. And as county clerk, Carrie is responsible for ensuring that citizens are able to register or change their voter registrations, and that they can use registrations to vote at a secure location, and that they can be confident that all those votes will be cast and honestly counted. So Carrie's going to be speaking with us tonight about the Freedom to Vote Act. Freedom to Vote Act is the compromise version of the For the People Act, currently being considered in Congress, and it was co-sponsored by Senator Manchin. The act proposes to promote racial justice, thwart the assault on voting rights occurring in many states, and to set national standards to protect the freedom to vote, and it addresses many other issues. We have a link to the Brennan Center if you want some more information on that in our newsletter, if you haven't reviewed that. But let's welcome Carrie, and I'll hand it over to her now to speak. So thank you for coming tonight.
Well, thank you.
Take it away.
Thank you, Sarah, and the members of the league for inviting me to be here this evening. I'm not an expert on the Freedom to Vote Act by any stretch of the imagination, but I will share with you some of my thoughts about it and open it up for questions. And, you know, we can talk about how it would affect our elections here in Monongalia County. But this started out as the For the People Act earlier, and that got a lot of attention, got a lot of people very upset. I think in West Virginia, from my standpoint, many of the things that were in both bills we were already doing, especially here in Monongalia County, and it wasn't going to impact us like it might have some other counties in our state or some of the other states. I sort of took the view about both of these pieces of legislation that West Virginia runs the best elections in the nation, and that I wanted something that was going to make all the other states in the nation run elections like West Virginia does. And every piece of legislation that comes out of Washington, gets tangled up in a struggle. Sometimes when they don't, it's not necessarily about what's in the bill itself, but all these other extraneous factors. And I think that that's where these elections bills have sort of fell in line with that they get tied up in all the partisan politics and are used as leverage for different things. But The Freedom to Vote Act was the compromise piece of legislation that came out. Senator Klobuchar, Senator Manchin worked on this. It was going to extend early voting from to a 15-day period. I think some states do a 20-day or a longer period. West Virginia, we used to do a 20-day early voting period. Now we're down to a 10-day voting period. So the language of the legislation said that it was going to standardize it across the nation at 15 days. That would not have been a problem for us at all. Offering same-day voter registration at all polling locations by 2024. That is problematic for a state like West Virginia, just because of the how technologically challenged we are with the lack of broadband throughout our state. I certainly don't think that it can't be done, but I think it's a financial problem for many of our counties. It can be done very easily in Monongalia County, but not necessarily as easy in a Doddridge, Ritchie, Wirt County situation in West Virginia for those computer broadband kind of issues. I think that that one aspect has a lot of county clerks nervous about that because they just don't know how they would implement it. We could do it certainly in Monongalia County with no problem. Automatic voter registration was another aspect of the Freedom to Vote Act through the DMV, which we're already registering voters through the DMV. The only change would be it moves from an automatic voter registration, just means that any person who conducts a transaction at the Department of Motor Vehicles would have to opt out instead of opt in. Right now, they're opting in when they complete a transaction, such as changing the title or renewing their license or registration. They can update their voter registration at that time, and we get probably 85% of our new voter registrations or our updates or changes come through the DMV and the online system. So vast majority of the public is using that electronic technology. So the only thing that AVR would do would be to switch it from an opt-out instead of an opt-in situation for the public. I do know that our West Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles just upgraded their DMV system because West Virginia voted and passed a automatic voter registration legislation a couple of years ago. And so our state was prepared to do that. And I think it got put on the back burner at some point in the state legislature. But I do know I sat in on some meetings with the state DMV about their new software and when they were purchasing their new system. And so they were prepared to be ready for the implementation of automatic voter registration. So that would not necessarily been a problem for us either. It would establish, the Freedom to Vote Act would establish a no excuse absentee voting for all federal elections, similar to what we experienced in 2020 due to COVID. Monongalia County, typically in a presidential year, we would have probably 1,500 to 2,000 absentee ballots, mail-in ballots. And in the primary of 2020, we processed over 14,000. And we did that all in-house. We handled every one of them, our staff, and we had them all processed, sorted, counted by election day. And I think that was largely in part due to the Secretary of State's office working with the governor's office at that time to put into the executive order about changing the election that we could go ahead and start processing the absentee ballots just like we do the early voting ballots during the early voting time period, and we didn't have to wait until the close of polls on election day. So I think that was a huge thing that we learned from the pandemic about how handling mail-in ballots and that large number of mail-in ballots, that using that early voting period to start processing those enables you to have them done and completed by election day. So we were able to do that in 2020. I did not see a problem with opening that up, making that a no excuse process. We certainly could handle it here in Monongalia County. Count all provisional ballots for eligible races in a county, regardless of the precinct that they were cast in. That piece of the legislation is a little bit more problematic the way West Virginia currently has their election laws established, because we are a precinct specific jurisdiction for election day, meaning if you are registered to vote, unlike early voting where you can vote at an election center and anybody across the county registered in any precinct can appear at early voting, we have all of those precincts ballots loaded there, so you can walk into any early voting center, vote your ballot during early voting, no problem. In order for West Virginia to be able to do this, the provisional ballots the way under the Freedom to Vote Act, West Virginia would have to move to that type of a jurisdiction where instead of you appearing in person on election day at an assigned precinct based upon your residence address, you could appear at any other location that would have those same contests on that ballot. So could that be done? Yes. Is that going to take some changing in the state legislation? Yes. I think that in many aspects there's a lot of things that I think that could happen, that our state could take the lead on making some changes that would help our voters, even more so than what the Freedom to Vote Act did. You know, as they're talking about, handling provisional ballots, if you don't appear to vote in person at your assigned precinct and letting those contests count, well, one thing that the legislature could look at is while they're extending early voting for the 15-day period, to have the early voting period run clear to election day itself, so that if you were that last day, so to speak, of early voting should be on election day, so that you would have everyone voting. They could vote at an election center. They didn't have to vote at a specific location. That would save money for the counties on elections, because they wouldn't have all of the different polling locations that they have to have around the county. It would save on poll workers, the number of poll workers that you would need. So there's other things that I think our state could look at to try to help the voters. But does anyone have any questions so far?
I had a quick question about the provisional ballots at precincts. How heavy a lift would that be to load all of the precinct ballots on all of the machines?
For our county, it's not a heavy lift at all, because
Okay.
I can, because of the equipment that we use, the Express Vote electronic, we would load all of the ballots just like we do early voting on the machines and send them out. and the way we process our voters when they come in to check in to vote, that's where we specifically assign those voters in the poll book. So when, you know, if you're appearing to vote, let's say at Morgantown High School, only all of the voters in the county are loaded on Morgantown High School's poll book, but only the ones registered at Morgantown High School are given the clearance to vote at that location. So if you walked in and your typical precinct was, you know, Mason-Dixon Park, and you walked into Morgantown High School, and your name would not automatically come up. They would look countywide, and they would see that you're assigned to Mason-Dixon Park, and they would direct you to Mason-Dixon Park so that you would not have to vote a provisional ballot. Okay. So that provisional ballot isn't counted at that precinct anyway. So that, you know, they could accept that provisional ballot, and we could make arrangements on our electronic machines that that person could obtain a ballot style for precinct 52, which is Mason-Dixon Park, and be able to vote that ballot, because it's going to go back into a provisional envelope anyway. It's not going to go into that tabulator there at that precinct. So it would not be hard for our county to do at all.
Good to know.
Carrie?
Yeah.
During the 2020 general election, this issue about people showing up at the wrong precinct and having to vote a provisional ballot, how many of those ballots were there, and were they counted?
In 2020, give me just 1 second, because we have all of our election results online. So if you bear with me just 1 second, please.
Oh my goodness, she's going to look it up.
I can. Yeah, we try to keep. We have a long list of historical election results. And there is a report on there that is,
I should know this. I've looked at your data.
Yeah, it is our election summary with group detail. Okay, so there were 152 provisional ballots in the general election of 2020.
And of those, none of those were counted, or only some of them were counted, or?
Well, I should, let me rephrase. There were 152 counted. I would have to go back to the minutes of the canvassing board, and let me find out where my, I've sort of lost my Zoom screen, so there we go.
It's okay. It's okay.
I would have to go back to the minutes to see how many total there were.
Okay, but the bottom line is, some people show up at the wrong precinct and are told that they can cast a provisional ballot, but then in some of those cases, the provisional ballot won't count when it goes to canvass. Is that right?
Yes. Well, you know, our poll workers never tell a voter that they can cast a provisional ballot. What our duty is, first and foremost, is if a person appears to vote, our duty is to get them to vote at the correct voting on election day, so that they do not have to count a provisional ballot, because every voter wants their vote in and tabulated on election day. They do not want that vote going to an independent canvassing board who's going to make a judgment about it after the election. And so our training to our poll workers is very specific, and that's why we have the system that we have in place. So our poll worker you can appear And if you're not appearing at your right location, we will direct you to your correct location so that you can get there and cast your standard, what we call a standard ballot that is not a provisional. So a provisional ballot is something we do as a last resort. If we cannot do anything else for you to get you to vote a standard ballot, then as a last resort, so that you have something cast, we will cast a provisional ballot, let you cast a provisional ballot at that precinct. Many times, the vast majority of provisional ballots are people who are not registered at all. And then we are a college community, and so a lot of college students will come and they will try to vote and not realize they haven't switched their voter registration by the deadline of the election. And so that, when you look at the reasoning that is put down for provisional ballots, the vast majority of them is that they are not registered to vote at all, not that they are voting at the wrong precinct. That would be the smaller percentage.
That's really cool. A place like Mon County, same-day voter registration could help solve that problem.
Yes. The one thing about same-day voter registration, we could do that very easily at at the courthouse, for example, because we have access to all the information that we need when we are processing a voter registration that comes in through the DMV or online right now. Our poll workers, as many of you know who have served as a poll worker before, you take a 2-hour training before the election, and we try to be as thorough about everything as we can. But the poll workers, if you're opening same-day voter registration to the entire county, the poll workers would not be as adept at knowing whether or not this is how to assign a voter based upon their residence address to a specific precinct, how to make sure that that voter is choosing, if it's a primary election, they're choosing a political party so that they can vote a certain political party ballot. Those kind of things could be a little bit problematic. It would require more training for our poll workers to open it up and do it at every location. But I certainly think that we could do it at one location, or at least do it during early voting. Even if we didn't do it on election day itself, at all of the locations, I do think that we could do it through they could appear at any early voting location, which is up to 3 days before the election, and any of our early voting location stations would be able to process that.
Thank you.
And just to
Sorry to get
clarify,
that so far down in the weeds.
Well, that's okay.
so just to clarify, voters can't do that now because of the cutoff date, right, for voter registration okay.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds like a really good idea, though, having it during early voting. It seems like an easy thing to change anyway.
Yes, I think that could be a change, but when voters, what I have found since I've been the county clerk, I've been for 15 years, 14, going to be 15 next year. Voters are very proud of their voter registration. They take it very seriously. Our county they're very proud voters. They want to make sure their voter registration is accurate. They want to make sure that it's up to date. They call, that we have a lot of different technological advances that voters can use from the comfort of their own home to double check, to make sure that we haven't spelt their name wrong, we've got them in the right precinct, what their senatorial districts and all these different kind of things are, and they can access all of that very easily. And so we always tell voters they'll say, I need to get a new voter registration card because I don't want to get denied when I go to vote. I want to have that card in my hand. And we try to comfort them and assure them that if you appear to vote, you know, with a driver's license, a credit card, you know, vehicle registration card, whatever form of ID you have, and you are in our system, you will be able to vote. And even if you're not in our system, at the bare minimum, you're going to be able to cast a provisional ballot. And so we virtually never have anyone who appears to vote at a precinct that does not cast a ballot, either standard ballot or provisional ballot, because that's just, I do not want them to miss that opportunity. If there's been a problem and, you know, our office has not processed something correctly and they just could not find them, at least if they've cast that provisional ballot, we can sort that out between the end of the election and the canvassing board.
Great. Any other questions, or did you have any more on your presentation? We kind of went off on a Q&A, but I wasn't sure if you were ready for the Q&A part.
Oh, sure. No, I know I had told Vicki earlier that I really didn't have, I'm sure that you all are much more versed about the specifics of the bill than but I would certainly help answer any questions, especially how it relates to our county. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Erin? Hi.
Yes.
Hi, this is Judith Stitzel.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to take a moment to say how much we all appreciate the work that you do. I think we're so proud of being a county that has done so well, and it doesn't just happen automatically. And your expertise and your calm and your respect is deeply appreciated by all of us here and by the whole county, I'm sure.
I appreciate that. Our entire office really appreciates that. We work very hard to provide the most efficient, effective elections that we can for our county. And so I'll certainly share that with all of our staff. Thank you very much.
I do have a question. Do you have any idea, or could you help us find who at the university would be the person to speak with to get the information to students so that they could start to register accurately, so that they don't show up thinking they're registered and not? Is there an office at the university? Is there some, because I think there would be very frustrating for a student, but obviously they can't vote if they're not registered. But it seems to me an obligation that the university might want to take on to do some education. Where would somebody begin? Is there some influence you could have?
Well, I worked with the university on several different projects. Our office actually used to run their student government elections. They had some problems with their student government elections several years ago, and they sought our help. And we were happy to help them, and we would take our machines and we hired poll workers. We did the whole thing, and mainly I was hopeful that it would develop a partnership so that we could use some college students to be poll workers, for our elections and those kind of things. We also have worked with them to try to get a voting precinct on campus because the transportation challenge is the biggest thing I think for the college students is in finding where they're supposed to go. And then during early voting, if the university didn't have a bus system to bus the students from the mountain lair or the rec center or whatever to the early voting site, they wouldn't have an opportunity. The closest that we've never been able to get a location on site. I was hopeful that we were going to be able to do it for 2020, and then COVID hit, and that sort of changed all those plans. But we've been lucky enough to get at the Erickson Alumni Center, which is the closest thing to university campus. And that's been a wonderful location for us, and the students all sort of know where that is. But Professor Eric Heron has worked a lot with our office. He works as a poll worker. He has a class dealing with political science, I believe, and he has his students, they will work our elections. I think he makes that a part of his class, that they have to sign up to be a poll worker or some kind of a volunteer for the election, and he works as a poll worker. So he's the first name that comes to mind about the university and the civic responsibility of the students to vote would be Professor Eric Heron. But I'm sure that there is a vice president of one of their departments or something at the university who would be in charge of student outreach or something of that nature. But I'll share with you something that you may or may not know that we do in Mon County in relation to our high schools. And probably 6 or 8 years ago, I partnered with the Mon County Board of Education, and we created a high school voting day. And what I was noticing, because the county clerks go into the high schools every year to register the senior class. But what I was noticing was, because election day is not a holiday, which is another thing I think that the Freedom to Vote Act was trying to do, is make it a national holiday so that everyone had the day off. But because it was not a holiday, the schools were closed, but the parents still had to work. So we would register the students to vote, and they would never have an opportunity to go cast their first ballot because no one would be home to take them to vote. And if their parents didn't vote, they wouldn't have a way to get there. So what we did was, we will go in the week before the voter registration cutoff date, and the next week starts early voting. So we would go in and we would register the student, and then the Board of Education would send a bus to each of the high schools. And all the students who registered would get on the bus, and they would take them down to the early voting site nearest to the high school, and they could cast their ballot for the very first time. Because I felt if they didn't get to cast that ballot, as soon as they registered to vote, they were likely never to go cast that ballot. But if they caught that bug early, that hopefully they would be a continual voter. And I think that's been very successful for us. We've managed to do that in each election since we implemented it. And the Board of Education has been very gracious. They will send the buses, and they'll pick up the teachers or whoever at that school is eligible to go vote, and they will drive them down there. So it's a nice outing for the students. It's a nice civic exercise, but at least we knew that they could actually get to cast their ballot the first time.
Has there been publicity about that through the newspapers? That's fabulous. I mean, that is something that's wonderful. Has that been written up either by the league and then sent to the newspaper, or from your office?
I'm not certain. It has not been written up by our office. No, we don't. We work very closely with the Board of Education on it, and I'm not certain if they have promoted it through their contacts or not. And I think when we first started it, there was some news or some press about it, but it's just sort of it's just become an automatic routine of what we do in our elections. And, but so we don't publicize that. We just go and actually do it. And, but it has been very successful, and we're honored that the Board of Education still will send the buses and everything and go take the students.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Carrie, that is so fabulous. I've never seen anything written up in the Dominion Post about it. And one of the advantages to getting it publicized is people in other counties would learn about it. Do you know any other counties do this?
I think that there are a couple other counties that are now doing it. Harrison County may be one. But I'm not 100% sure. But I think Harrison County, I think I was at a state conference one time and the Harrison County talked about it. I'm not certain if they made arrangements for the Board of Education to bus their students or how they actually work their program. But I think that they try to do something for high school students. But that's the only county close to us that I think.
Carrie, as far as the Dominion Post goes, we just had a Human Rights Commission just had an excellent experience making contact with them and their editorial board. And they produced 4 articles on the topic that we were seeking to bring forward to the City Council and to the public. So I urge you to, rather than waiting, I would encourage you to let Pam Queen know that you have some material that you'd like to have shared. And I'm sure Pam would, Jessica Nelson, and we met with 5 editorial boards members, and we met for an hour and a half. It was lunchtime, and they gave us the entire time. It was just wonderful. They asked penetrating questions and took voluminous notes from the things that we said, and we could not have been happier with the way it all worked out.
Oh, that's great. I will do that, Dawn. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Carrie, I was wondering if there's anything that comes to mind that, looking forward with what the league will be doing over the next year and a half, what can we do to help you get people registered? What can we do to help with any kind of voting related issue? If anything comes to mind.
Well, I think that, turnout continues to be our biggest problem in our county. It's not the registration aspect. We have 60,000 registered voters. And so I think, we are able to, our voters are, the public is able to register, okay. And it's just that they just do not exercise that right after they get registered. And so I think, the more forums that you hold, the more press releases that you do about the ease of voting, where our early voting locations are, helping us spread that word, encouraging our voters to know that, there is an election coming up and, this is early voting time period. And we had a full marketing plan that we were going to strategize for 2020 to try to concentrate on increasing our turnout numbers, and the pandemic hit. But, we were going to deploy some, I don't know what the words are, but like at the gas, the things that cover the cement posts in front of the gas stations, those bollards, I think that they're called, to to do some marketing with those so that people going into gas stations, would know, okay, this is the week that you're supposed to go vote, and vote here, call this number, check this website if you're trying to see if you're registered. And so anything that you can do along those lines. We take elections very seriously in our county and in our office. We try to be as respond within a 24-hour time period to anything that comes into our office, whether it's by email, by voice, by phone, in person. And we try to be very responsive because we want everyone. I wish that we had a consistent, 60 to 70% turnout for our elections. And so anything that you can do to help us get the word out, I think that's our biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm.
All right, one of the things that you mentioned several things that you'd considered. You mentioned things that would help, and I think it's extremely important that the county clerks of the state, or however you would work with the legislature, would provide a list of the changes that you recommend. And I don't know how you proceed as a county clerks group, or how you would proceed as an individual county clerk. But having our legislators able to introduce something before people introduce something another way, I think is extremely important. And there's a lot of people out there that have some individual ideas, or ideas they've picked up from some of the networks or associations that are really, really against voting, or try to find some way to stop voting. And we respect the way you operated the office and your perspectives on the future. And we'd love to see you get a bill in the legislature that people could support. And I know the League of Women Voters has a very good network around the state to be able to generate some support. So please let us know if we can help on that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I certainly will. I'll certainly be happy to jot down the things that I think, just from our perspective in this county, things that I know could potentially be a benefit to our voters. And I don't really look at it from the aspect of, will it make my life easier as a county clerk? I look at it from the perspective, is it easier for the voter? Because at the end of the day, the voter has to have the confidence in their ballot. They have to have a confidence in their leadership in the county that when they do go in to vote, it's not going to take them 2 hours. I would say that there's not a voter in our county that waits more than 15 minutes, depending on what time of the day they go in. And if they go to early voting, it's even less than that. And we've worked for years to get ourselves to that point, to get the equipment that allows us to do that. But I still think, I'm always thinking about the next things coming down so that our voters have the best of the best technology, the best efficiencies in voting in elections that we can. The problem with, when you just being one clerk, and I can pose my ideas to our local legislators, but when they go to put the bill in, and they've got to get buy-in from the rest of the state legislators to make some of these changes, they look at the county, not just the County Clerks Association, but the way that the officials associations are ran. The legislation that the county clerks put forward is voted on by all the associations, and their county association lobbyists cannot work on things that is not approved by all the different assessors, prosecutors, sheriffs. You know, they each have their own legislative agendas, and they've all got to sort of come to an agreement about that. So they get into a situation, Dawn, that they pick and choose their battles. They look at things that they think that they can get passed. And what ends up happening, as many of you know, with any legislative process, you spend the legislative session fighting against things, fighting against bad pieces of legislation to not get it passed, instead of getting to work and support and promote good pieces of legislation that should get passed. And, you know, that's just the nature of the beast. But you take it a little bit of a little bit this time, a little bit next time. And I think that's one of the things why, you know, sort of coming back to the Freedom to Vote Act, or For the People Act, or whatever they want to call it. In 2002, you know, many of you will remember when Help America Vote Act came out, it was just as contentious, because it was we came off of the 2000 presidential election. There was lawsuits, everybody was up in arms, there was hanging chads, everybody said, we've got to do something about elections in this nation. And, you know, that was 20 years ago. You know, that legislation was passed in 2002. That legislation is what enabled our states, because prior to the Help America Vote Act, we did not have, each county in each state was operating independently. So until then, one of the things the Help America Vote Act said is you have to have a statewide voter registration system. So if somebody's registering in Morgantown, the first thing that we do when we enter it into our system is it checks statewide and makes sure that they're not registered in Huntington. Maybe they were from Cabell County. And if they were, then we pull their registration from Cabell County and it pulls over to Morgantown, and it's not duplicated. Well, there is no national voter registration system. So that Help America Vote Act did make each state have to have a statewide voter registration system to link their counties together. But there's nothing that links the states together. So that's where the ERIC came in, the electronic registration, something. There's like 14 states that participate in what we call ERIC. And it does that. They share their voter registration databases. And so they will, I think, annually review to see if, you know, there's anybody who matches the last four social or a name or a birth date with any of these other 14 states that could possibly be a duplicate. And then we send postcards to those people and say, okay, you know, did you move to South Carolina? Tell us where you're at, so that one state or the other can take you off and get you straightened around. And so West Virginia participates in ERIC, but there's nothing that links all 50 states together. So you'll have some people, and this has come up in campaigns down through the years. Some people will be registered in Florida because they spend 6 months in Florida, and some people will be registered and they'll still be registered in West Virginia. So it's not against the law to be registered in two different states. It's against the law to vote in the same election twice for the same election. But there was just as much, I think, argument about the implementation of Help America Vote in 2000 as there is now, for the people or the freedom to vote. The one difference, and I did share this with people early on about the For the People Act. Help America Vote Act brought money to the table. You know, it was federally funded and still is federally funded. You know, had the Elections Assistance Commission, all that kind of stuff. Freedom to Vote Act doesn't, unless they've put something in the Freedom to Vote Act that was not in the For the People Act. It did not have any appropriations assigned to it. And you know, that's I think that was probably the biggest hurdle. You know, elections are expensive. Manipulating databases are expensive. The technology is expensive. You know, we do a lot of things locally in our county, hands-on. We'll make them ourselves because we can do it so much cheaper than buying it. I can buy a pencil for 10 cents, but if I buy it through an election vendor, it's a $2 pencil. I mean, and I'm not kidding. It's everything is, the minute you put the word election in front of it, whether it's tape, you know, anything, pencils, pens, anything, it's just astronomical, the price that they want for these supplies. And so I know that was one big hurdle, was the lack of appropriations with these most recent bills.
Was there an appropriation with the For the For the People Act?
No, I'm not sure if there was one, because I know that was one of our chief complaints about For the People. They needed to put, if they were going to make all these requirements to the state, that they needed to provide the states with the money to do that. And I'm not certain if the Freedom to Vote Act ever added in any. I know they made some, it was a sort of a concessions bill. And so, but I don't know at the end of the day if they ever did add in. I never saw any money numbers when they were talking about it. So I don't know if they did or not. But I know that the For the People Act did not.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that there wasn't money attached to it. So that's a fair criticism. Yeah, if you want to have new regulations, money's going to make it happen. Otherwise, you're going to have opposition. That's interesting.
And you know, and I think that was a big difference. You know, with when Help America Vote came along, it came with federal money, and but For the People didn't, and I'm fairly certain they didn't add that in to the Freedom to Vote. And that could be because, you know, they're also fighting about other financial legislation at the same time, and you know, I don't know even if they went through and put a price tag on the Freedom to Vote Act, but
That's interesting.
Yeah, because going from 10 days to 15 days of early voting, that would be, you know, more labor cost. Wouldn't cost any more for equipment, but it would be more labor cost, probably more rent if you had to rent a location to hold your voting in. Those kind of things, but so the counties would have to bear those costs without getting any appropriations.
Where does the thing stand with vote by mail in West Virginia at the present time?
At the present time, there's no interest that I know of by other county clerks or other legislators. I used to be on the fence about vote by mail because we were being in a college community. Our voters are really transient, and so, you know, when vote by mail the concept first came out, you know, in the city of Morgantown did it. I think at the time that they did it for a municipal election, they had about 17,000 registered voters, and they blanketly, sent out their mail, and probably about 7,000 of them come back because they were transient college students, that kind of thing, which you would expect in the city of Morgantown, because that's where all the college students are registered. But then I look back at 2020 and what we were able to do in a very short period of time, just sprung on us in 30 to 45 days. And we processed, without any advanced planning, 14,000 ballots by mail. And we had, I think that we mailed out, I'd have to go back and look at my notes now, but I think we had requests for maybe 15,000 and some odd number, and we got back 14,000. So we only had 1,500 or so that were not returned for some various reason. So it was a very, very small number. And what I learned from that was people did like it. If they took the time to request it, and if you remember the Secretary of State's office, they had created an electronic portal where you could go in and just go in and fill your name and information out, and it was hooked into our statewide voter registration system, and you could request your absentee ballot online, and boom, the next day we were mailing out your ballot, and it was very easy. And I was 110% supporter of that online system, because it took the pressure off of us handling all those paper applications coming in, and we could process things so much more correctly and efficiently using the online system. But it worked. I mean, the people, 14,000 and some people used that system and requested a ballot. And I learned from that we could make it work. I liked the fact that people requested the ballot, and they could track it from the time they requested it to the time they got it to the time that it got back to our office, and they could follow it through the whole entire process. And I think that if I would like to see them entertain a vote by mail, even if they entertain it and made it an option in addition to early voting. And if they did something that was like I was talking about earlier, if you change early voting and let it come until election day and eliminate all of the separate precincts that we use on election day, and then incorporate a vote by mail component where people make a request if they would rather vote, by mail-in ballot, they could make that request on the online portal, or they could show up to early voting. And I would like to see the legislature experiment with some of those things. Even if they did a pilot, I think that they could try a pilot project. We did a pilot. I participated in 2 pilot projects. One in 2010, when Secretary Manchin, at that time Secretary of State Manchin, was Secretary of State, about using an electronic online system for our military and our overseas. And we were the first county to participate in that project, and then we participated in the second one that they ran, I think in 2016. We participated in both of them, and they both worked wonderfully. And I was so hopeful after that that they were going to they being our state legislature, was going to open up that electronic online system for all absentees, domestic as well as overseas, because it worked so well for our military and our overseas voters that I was hopeful that for ADA compliance and those kind of issues, that they would open that up for our domestic absentees. But they they sort of just dropped it after we proved that it worked so well. So I think that there's still, you know, a lot of things that our state legislature could do to help the voters, to provide more access to the voters. I don't see the problem with having more tools in your toolbox. You know, just because you don't use them all, maybe in your county, doesn't mean that the state shouldn't have availability to them, because our counties are becoming so disproportionate, if you will, population wise. And, you know, we're going through our redistricting period right now. And as I'm sure many of you were following the legislature and the Senate and the House about redistricting, and the wide divide between populations. You know, Monongalia County at 105,000, and vast majority of counties around us are not even half of the size and population that we are. Jefferson and Berkeley and the Eastern Panhandle, and then Kanawha. So we're the third largest county in the state, and we have more. I think I looked at one time, not under the current 2020 numbers, but at one time with our voter registration numbers were higher than, I think at the time, the populations in 40 of our 55 counties, our voter registration numbers. And so things that, you know, we just cannot vote by the old fashioned paper ballot anymore. And I certainly don't think that we want to, where that may be able to work in some smaller counties because they have less than 5,000 people. But, you know, in our county, we have to take advantage of the technology. We have to take advantage of those tools, additional tools in our toolbox, to make sure that everybody that's got an opportunity to register can register and can get to be able to cast their ballot.
Well, the vote by mail that was conducted by the city in 2011 produced the best results of the last 10 elections in the city. And even there was one high vote count because of a very competitive election in 2003. But then it goes back another 5 or 6 years before there was another election. So in the last 25 or 30 years, the vote by mail is number 2, I believe it is, in terms of the percentages as far as city elections go. And I certainly agree that we need a lot of tools in the toolbox, and vote by mail is definitely for people like, you know, like myself. I worked out in Cumberland, and it was always a hardship to work out consistently time to be in town for the vote, what have you. And everybody, there's a lot of people who have circumstances, employment wise and health wise, caretaking wise, that makes it really very difficult to get there. And I hope we can include in that toolbox ways in which people who have those circumstances can participate in elections.
Yeah. I agree. You know, and that's why I was saying, you know, in addition to opening up, making absentee voting more of a no excuse process, so that people can take advantage of it. You know, that was why I was hopeful that maybe our online voting for those that are more of a handicap disadvantage about getting out would be able to take advantage of the online system. And they did open up in 2020. One of the excused reasons on the absentee ballot was opened up for voters who had a disability, that they could vote, they could qualified to vote online. You know, a lot of seniors have macular degeneration and just cannot see very well, and they have special apparatuses on their computers that help them see and function. And so they did open that up on there, but we only had 2 or 3 voters who took advantage of that. I think probably because they didn't really understand what that meant when they saw that on the form. So, you know, the things like you're talking about, if you just made it no excuse so that people could just ask for the ballot, then I think that we could reach more voters.
Question, Carrie, about redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the legislature has finished their work slicing and dicing us,
Mm-hmm.
and boy, have they sliced and diced. As I understand it, and this is just from reading the Dominion Post, you have to do some slicing and dicing of your own, or at least you have to make some recommendations to the county commission. Can you explain what goes on at the county level now that the legislature's done?
Yeah, sure, be happy to. So one of the things after the legislature meets and determine the numbers that they get from the Census Department, and they set their House of Delegates boundaries and their Senate boundaries. The county, being the county commissioners, have the responsibility to redraw their magisterial district boundaries, their executive committee precinct boundaries, and our voting precinct boundaries, so that each of those additional boundary jurisdictions can comply with and be as equally represented by the updated population numbers as closely as we can get it. So what we are in the process, and we started last week, I've involved our county surveyor, I've involved our West Virginia GIS personnel, our local GIS personnel, and my elections and voter registration staff. And we started looking at the House districts, our magisterial lines, and some of our precinct boundary lines. We have not yet received the map from the Senate for the Senate lines, but we started to look at the magisterial lines especially. We do not vote by magisterial district in Monongalia County, but magisterial district affects where a candidate would qualify if they were running for the position of Board of Education or County Commission. So anyone who is interested in running for a county commission seat runs from a magisterial district. And even though you're on the ballot countywide for any voter in the county to vote for you, you have to reside in one of the assigned magisterial districts to be a qualified candidate for that particular contest. Same way for Board of Education, their contests are split between the magisterial districts, and so no more than 2 members of their board can be from any one magisterial district, even though they are voted on by all the voters in Monongalia County. So those magisterial districts are important for that reason, so that candidates who may be interested in one of those positions would know where are they going to be now in the Western, if they were previously in the Central. You know, the Central magisterial district for our county is what I call City of Morgantown proper, but that's where all of our population is. And so as you're trying to equalize between 3 districts, you're taking some people out of Central district and either putting them in Eastern or putting them in Western to equalize the districts. We came in at 105,288, I think, population in the county. So we're looking at 35,274 people trying to balance. We try to stay within as smallest deviation that we can. I think we aim to be within 1% of each of the districts. I think that I don't think that the law specifically gives a number that you have to stay within. It just says that they have to be as equally represented. But past legislation at the Supreme Court level, I think, frowns upon anything that is beyond 5%, between 5 and 10%. So we try to stay well under 5% if we can. And we look at our magisterials first. The county commission, once they make a determination how they're going to switch or change these magisterial lines, then we publish a notice of that to the public, and we posted at 3 locations throughout the county, one at the courthouse, and then one in each of the magisterial districts, so that the public has a 30-day period that they can look at this. We'll put it on our website, of course. They can look at these magisterial lines and make comments, suggestions to the county commission, and then after a 30-day period, the county commission will order their enter an order at one of their meetings to solidify those as being our magisterial boundaries for the next 10-year cycle.
And does all this have to be done before November 8th?
Well, that is that's a good question. I say yes, because if you look at the Constitution says to any candidate that you have to reside in that district a year before you take office. And the election is November 8th of 2022. So that would mean that any candidate would have to be in that district by November 8th of 2021. Well, if you were interested in running for one of these seats that's in a specific magisterial district and you didn't know you were on the fringe of one of these districts and you didn't know if you were going to be moved or not, you wouldn't have enough time to move your physical residency to qualify, right? So I've always been of the opinion, normally, the last redistricting we went through in 2010 was nothing like this one. Normally, the Census Bureau gets the states their information in April, and the counties are working through these different issues in June, July, and August. And we have everything sort of solidified by September or October. Not been an issue. But because the states did not get their information from the federal government until September, the legislature was pushed back. They didn't get their stuff until October. I believe that there was language in the redistricting bills that gave the counties until January to get this information done. Not that they're suggesting that the counties wait until January, because if you remember, candidates filing period starts January 10th and January the 28th. And I think the legislation allowed the counties to go until January 22nd before they determined their boundaries. So I don't know how that is even, I don't know how you would take a candidate filing, how a candidate would file on January the 10th if they weren't certain where their district was until January the 22nd. But I'm going to do everything in my power that we're not in that boat. So anyone that is interested in running for a seat that would be determined by magisterial district, I would encourage them, to talk to us and at least open up a conversation so that they can see even even as we're in this process, working with the county commission about these lines so that they will know as quickly as possible. But yeah, I think that it could still potentially be a challenge, a Supreme Court challenge, I guess, if somebody didn't, wanted to be a candidate and registered to be a candidate and then ended up not being in the district. So it's a challenge, but we're working on it sooner rather than later.
That same issue could arise with not so much with the House districts, because the maps they put out were on Google Earth, and you can really project to find out street level stuff. But the Senate maps that were made public weren't like that. And I don't know, for example, if I live in Senate District 2 or Senate District 13. It's not clear from the map.
Yeah.
So
I know. And
that's going to have to happen as well, right? And does that come from the county?
No, the Senate districts comes from the state. The counties are responsible for their magisterial districts. And then we have to lay down the delegate districts and the Senate districts that the legislature mandated. And we have to look at how those delegate and senatorial districts affect our precincts. Because you cannot have more than one delegate district in a single precinct, or more than one senatorial district in a single precinct. And so for, like, in our particular case, we had 3 senatorial districts in this county and 3 House of Delegates districts. Now we're going to 6, maybe 7 House of Delegates.
6.
Is it 6? And 2 senatorial districts. But I'm still not clear on the House districts about the western end, because we had 2 precincts at the western end up against Wetzel County that were in the 5th delegate district, where Dave Pethel and the Wetzel County group was. And I'm not certain if those 2, if the 77th delegate district, which is what's serving that western end, if that is going clear to our county line, or if it's only going in the far end of our county is still in with Wetzel. So we're working through that right now. But the delegates and the Senate, I guess, would technically comply because they had their work done by November the 8th. But we can't, the maps that you are seeing or not seeing online is the same thing that the county is dealing with, that we don't have any, any different information. We don't have any better information. I know that West Virginia GIS is trying to help the counties as much as they possibly can. We're fortunate here. We've got a GIS coordinator who's helping me. We have a county surveyor who's very active, and he will come and he's met with me, and he will do anything that we need him to do. Many counties are not that fortunate, and it'll take them till January, because you remember all of their staff have not been able to go anyplace because of COVID. So here they are for they're right up against Thanksgiving now. They're right up against Christmas. I don't know how they're going to get it all done and then be ready to start taking candidate filings in January.
It's very enlightening. I didn't realize so much that there was so many requirements to get this last piece of the redistricting done. I thought the worst of it was over, but this is really nuts and bolts.
Oh, no. The easiest part The easiest part of the redistricting is what the legislature did.
Yeah.
The real heavy lifting is on the county's shoulders.
Yeah.
And I know that it's really worrying a lot of our different county clerks. You know, we've got to listen and they'll put their frustrations out there, and it's really worrying them. Many of them have never been through a redistricting process before. Many of them have no GIS experience. They do not, you know, you cannot just overlay these things on Google Maps and think that you're going to create districts and things like that. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge for them. But West Virginia GIS and the Secretary of State's office, I think, has worked with the governor's office to try to provide some funding. And they've earmarked $275,000, I think, to give $5,000 to each county on a reimbursable basis if they need to hire West Virginia GIS to help them with their maps. So that will help some of these counties and will help the GIS. But there's only 2 guys at West Virginia GIS, and so they're going to try to divide themselves between 55 different counties, and it's just going to take them a while. But we're jumping on it quickly because we want to be the first ones trying to get this stuff done, and if we can get ours done, then that just frees them to go help some other counties that are in a lot worse situation than we are. But we want to get ours done quickly.
Yeah. Well, I know we've kept you a long time, Carrie, but this has been a really fascinating, enlightening discussion. So thank you so much for meeting with us and talking to us.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
We really appreciate, all the work that the league does, especially in Monongalia County, but statewide. You're a very, very important part of the electoral process, and I know our voters and the public depend on you to give them good guidance, and anything that I can ever do to help the league, certainly I stand ready to do so, because you are a valuable partner in the elections in West Virginia, period. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, we'll let you go. I'll give you some virtual applause, but thank you so much again.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so, I'll go ahead and leave. Good night, everyone.
All right, good night. And for all the members that are still on, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have board meetings on the 3rd Thursday of the month. All of the members are welcome to attend. We've been meeting over Zoom, so if you would like an invitation, send an email to lwvmorgantown@gmail.com. We'll get you the information to connect to those meetings. We're also, I mentioned in the newsletter that we're looking for volunteers to coordinate on some of the issues. We have several board members, issues in our program that I should say. We have several board members coordinating with different issues like voter services, Vicki Connor, social justice, Marley Uniguez. I'm collecting and reporting on information about broadband access, but other areas like local government, natural resources, and education. If you're interested in any of those areas and serving on committees to spread information, keep everybody up to date on that, let us know. So
I told you about the education.
Yeah, I got your voicemail. I told Jonathan to let you know.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Well, is there anything anybody else would like to talk about? All right. Well, thank you all for attending our wonderful. It's a wonderful discussion, so I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. Glad to see you all virtually. I'm going to share this online for those who couldn't attend. So thanks so much. Have a great evening.
Okay.